Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for our webinar on how to take your employee temperature. Today we have Andrew Jeavons, the CEO at Survey Analytics, and Vivek Bhaskaran, the president at Survey Analytics, that are going to be presenting this topic to you. We'll be doing a live Q&A following the presentation. Feel free to direct any questions in your GoToWebinar panel. And also, if you want to stick around after, we will have a live discussion with our hosts, and we'll have the information on that later. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic off to Andrew, and we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks again for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. If Viv wants to transfer presentership to me, that would be really great.
I'll do that right now. There we go. Andrew, you're the presenter now.
Cool. Let's get to the right place. There we go. Right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for attending. We really appreciate your time. How to take your employee temperature. Now, of course, we're not really talking about in the literal sense, but actually in our office recently, that would have been a good idea. They all seem to be dropping like flies or something. But it's really about getting a line on what's going on in your company and how people are feeling. And if anything else, a company is a collection of employees. In the long term, if you're going to grow your company, if you're going to increase your profitability, you're going to have to look after your people. It's that simple. If you have a bunch of people that are unhappy or that you're not meeting their needs, they're going to quit. And any of you know about running companies and managing people, replacing people is basically difficult and time consuming. So you've got to keep them in the company. You need to keep them happy. You need to know what's going on. Just a quick go over of our agenda. We'll have an introduction, employee feedback trends, problems encountered. We're going to start then with the new approach, which will be Vivek presenting Flashl, our latest product. Talk a bit about actual intelligence, and then we're going to have feedback and questions. And we're going to use a new facility, or one we haven't used before, on Survey Analytics, which is an online discussion system. We will put up the link. It's very easy to join, and it really means that we can keep the discussion going longer than we would normally. Introduction here, who's going to speak? Well, there's myself, there's some of my background, and Vivek Bhaskaran, the co-founder of Survey Analytics, well-known computer entrepreneur and fan of the Seattle Seahawks, which we'll get into later. Viv started Survey Analytics around 2003 and a couple of other companies, and it's great to have him on board giving us, talking to us today. What do your employees think? Well, you might not want to know what they think a lot of the time, particularly about you as a manager or an owner, but you do need to know. You'll also know if you're a supervisor or any sort of owner or CEO, you get limited information from people when you interact with them. You know, unless you're running a perfect company, you're not always going to hear about the things that are going wrong. You're not always going to hear about the things that employees don't like or they're worried about. Sometimes you will, but you're not going to find out everything. Nobody ever does. And this is always one of the challenges of management, is knowing what's going on. You know, because you can only steer the ship if you know what's going on within your division or company. If you don't know that, it's very difficult. Employees need to be able to share with you, and you need to be able to know what trends are in your group. Are people happy this week? Are they, you know, particularly sad? Are they upset about the Super Bowl? They're upset about the snow. I'm in the Midwest. Oh God, the snow. We actually have some sunshine today, and it's thawing, but you know, we've had snow on the ground for 10 days now. It's getting a bit depressing. All these kinds of things, although they sound trivial, if you have that information, it can help you steer the company. And most importantly, what do the employees think about the job? What do they think about the kind of job that you are doing as a manager or an owner? That's really critical. A few statistics here. I like statistics, numbers. Engaged employees have 18% higher productivity and 60% higher quality work than those that are not engaged. Now, productivity and quality directly feed to the bottom line. We know that this is important. We know that these things are important to make a company profitable, to enable you to go forward, to expand in markets and do whatever you want to do. People have to be engaged in their occupation. And in the United States, there's an estimate that disengaged employees result in $450 to $550 billion in lost productivity every year. That's a huge number. It's a massive number. I'm not quite sure I've ever seen any of my employees sitting there with their heads on their hands. I've done that, but it's the kind of thing that you don't want to see. And engagement, therefore, means lost profits. Hello?
Hey, Andrew, can I jump in over here for a minute?
Sure.
So I also want to, talk about engagement. I also want to talk about Greg Roth and Gallup did a pretty good poll about, if your manager is primarily ignoring you, the chances of you being disengaged are higher than if your manager is focusing on your weakness. So that's an interesting statistic where you can say, actually, if your manager is just disengaged with you, it's actually worse than him just giving you negative feedback all the time. So
And of course, you never ignore me, do you, Viv?
Of course not, I don't.
Yeah, we'll talk. Anyway, engagement means lost profit. And, I was reading a presentation on the web preparing for this, and it's very interesting. There was a quote there, and they said, employees don't leave companies, they leave managers. And I thought that was a really fascinating thing to say because, you'll talk about people leaving the company, but very often it's because they feel they're not getting what they need from their manager. And that's a pretty interesting comment, when you think about it. It's about you as a manager, it's about you as an owner. I did the ubiquitous Google search of employee engagement, and we got 40 million hits pretty much. 390,700,000. That shows that it's a really big subject, and it obviously shows that it's a big problem. Everybody's interested in this. Now, it's not like it's anything new. We've had solutions before. Now, the classic one that supposed to measure everything are the 360 surveys. That whole thing's been going for years. That's huge. But what's the incentive for the employee? It's this yearly thing, you've got to take part, it's big, HR probably doesn't want to do it. And the truth of the matter is, after a very short time, they're out of date. Companies live from day to day, from week to week, to month to month. A snapshot just doesn't capture what's going on in a company. And it's just it's a hugely distorted image of a company if you just do these surveys between very long times when you're not constantly monitoring what's going on. And data quality really is proportional to the recency of the data. So, if you've got a survey that's 3 months old of what was going on in the company, it's useless. You need to throw it away. It's not going to help you. It's not going to tell you what's going on this week. It's not going to tell you how people feel about the beginning of the quarter. It really isn't anything that you want to rely upon for a business strategy. And let's remember that employee engagement and satisfaction is a business strategy. It goes towards profitability. It goes towards retention rates of employees. And these have to be very important for any company. And annual surveys, as we're talking about a bit. Well, again, no real actionable results. Hey, people are pissed. What are you going to do? It's a thankless job. There's no immediate benefit from the employees. And we've really got to wonder why we're still doing it. So what we want to present today is a new approach to employee satisfaction and engagement and trying to find out what's going on within your company. And what we're going to talk about is Flashl. And now I'm going to hand it over to Viv.
All right. Can you hand it over? Waiting.
There you go. You're on.
All right. There we go. So let's get to the meat of it, as my friend says.
Can't see. Oh, there's slides. Yeah, got it.
All right. Great. So let's get to the meat of it. So we've come up with this model of effectively a weekly poll. And the key things that we want to do in this weekly poll is measure the temperature, which is effectively how was your week, an abstract question around how you felt, how the employee felt on a per week basis. Two key points over here. One, it has to be ridiculously simple and easy for the user to complete the survey. Not a link, a hyperlink on an email, but embedded in the email itself, you have the survey, you have the poll, and as you can see on the screen over here, you have three buttons, and you click on one of them really, and it runs on a weekly basis at towards the end of the week, and then you've got one of three buttons to click. That's it. And we believe that frequency is inversely proportional to depth, which means that if you can run a weekly poll, you can't really ask 10 questions on that weekly poll really. Nobody's going to complete it. So you want to keep it ridiculously simple and more importantly, ridiculously easy for users to complete it really. We've technology standpoint, there are a lot of things available today to make it even easier to interact with email as well as mobile, if you will. So the system is pre-designed for a mobile audience where you can just click on look at an email on your phone and click on one of three buttons really. And post to after you click on the email, we've obviously captured one of the sentiments, one of the three sentiments, and we also ask you a typical Twitter-like model where you can type in some comments on the highlights of the week or what was going on this week that made you feel one way or the other. In the last about 4 weeks or so, we've been doing a pilot with about 10 or 15 companies. A few interesting things have come up really. The secondary question, we call this the secondary question, which is the open-ended text question. People have started using that as a business indicator also. So one of my friends who's piloting this at Starbucks, he started using it from a context of he wanted to increase conversion rates. And the second question was not a temperature question per se, but the second question was like, what are three options for increasing? What's your any option for increasing conversion rates? So people have started using this in much more creative ways than just collecting feedback, but actually getting some input into their business and decision-making process also. So what happens on things on a weekly basis? You get trending, really. So this is actually a real-life example of how we've been running it. So you have some scores associated. You have data that's fairly granular if you think about it. So if every employee gives you a single tiny piece of data every week, if you have 70 employees, you have 70 data points really. And what we do to keep things easy and simple is at the end of the week, at about 5 o'clock in the evening, or maybe even over the weekend, we send out a report to the stakeholders, back to the stakeholders, the CEO, the management team, and saying, look, here's what happened this week. Here's what here's what most of the employees are talking about this week. Here's some analytical model behind it. 70%, where 70% of the employees were pretty happy this week. 17.5% were kind of in the middle, and about 10% feel pretty bad about this week. So this gives a snapshot from the management perspective on a weekly basis as to what is going on. And obviously from an analytical standpoint, you can imagine we can do a tremendous amount of correlation and regression analysis in terms of when you get this kind of granular data, really. So what does this lead to, really? Interesting stuff that you can do that you cannot do when you just run annual surveys per se. You can do trending. You can figure out if any one of your employees is consistently trending down, trending up. Not only that, you can also figure out if a group of employees are reporting to a particular individual. You can do cross-segmentation between managers. You can say, like, look, how is this? There are 4 people reporting to John and 4 people reporting to Susan, and Susan's scores are always lower than John's scores, really. Why is that? You can start looking into these kind of analytical models to say, can we use this to, infer infer behavior, if you will. Like I talked about, the granularity of the data is where this makes the system that much more interesting. I had a good example. I was talking to another friend of mine who had a couple of management consultants come into their office for organizational transformation. Obviously, when you want to transform your organization, you call in management consultants. We all know that, and they can ask, okay, what kind of data do you have to take a look at the company culture? Can we look at something? And of course, there was the biannual survey that the company had done, and they presented it to him. And the consultants look at that. Oh, okay, when was this done? Well, this was done about 4 or 6 months ago, really. And they took the data and threw it out, and they said, well, we can't really use this data because it's too old. We live in a tech environment. We need some trending data. We just can't use data that has been 6 months old. Maybe we can use it from year-to-year trends for very broad ideas, but nothing that's really actionable to us. So that's kind of one of the things that came out from that meeting. And my friend was talking to me about it, and this is kind of the genesis behind why we even came up with Flashlit, in terms of trying to find a way to kind of get high frequency data or on a weekly basis, as opposed to doing things on obviously on a monthly or a quarterly basis. So what can things, one of the things that, this system, like a temperature measurement system, is it's looking for symptoms, really. It can't really definitely tell you, like, here are the reasons why, employees are unhappy. What we can tell you is there are problem spaces that you need to investigate. And that's kind of the model that we are espousing right now. We are not going out and saying, look, this is going to solve all your problems. It's not going to solve all your problems. In fact, what it is going to do is to find the smokes, as it says over here, before it becomes a fire. So that's one of the things that a kind of ongoing employee feedback system can do for you. If you step back and think about this is not that much different than Net Promoter Score. If you're not familiar with Net Promoter Score, this was invented by Fred Reichel about 8 years ago, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, frankly. Everybody was trying to figure out how to measure customer loyalty. And Fred came up with a simple way to measure customer loyalty, which is ask a single question, and ask it at the point of transaction, really. Ask it right after the point of transaction. So if you buy a ticket from Southwest Airlines, you'll get an email saying, hey, would you recommend Southwest Airlines to a friend or a colleague? And that has pretty much taken off like wildfire, if you will. And because of the simplicity and the high frequency nature of it. Now, we're trying to effectively say that, this is something very similar to that, where you have a high frequency model for collecting very small bits of data and then use analytical models behind that to figure out patterns, really. So how are the scores calculated? We've come up with a model for calculating the scores that is, obviously gives weight to the positive and actually gives more weight to the negative scores to come up with a combined score, really. We also are taking into account scores from previous weeks. However, we are exponentially decaying those values. So realistically, you're looking at the scores that are on a weekly basis with some amount of input from the scores from previous weeks, really. So this is the current model that we have come up with, and we are obviously proposing, really. I want to step back over here and say, like, look, who all are using this? Where are we right now? Fundamentally, I'll be honest with you guys, we came up with the concept literally, early January. And we really loved it. Actually, the whole reason we came up with the concept was a totally different reason from a business perspective, really. And we have about 8 or 9 companies, mostly in Seattle, and a couple other companies here in San Francisco, as well as in San Diego, and also a company in India, actually, who've been using the system for about 3 to 5 weeks right now, from early January onwards to about 4 weeks really right now. And obviously, a bunch of our own companies are using it, really. And here's an example, from Rob, who runs IdeaScale. He was ecstatic about it, and he's almost addicted to the weekly emails. He, as as a manager gets, and he gets some visibility into the mood of his employees on a weekly basis. It's almost like an adrenaline shot for him, really. Parag, who's at StubHub, it's a group within StubHub that's using the system and piloting the system. And of course, my friend John from ZipWhip, he's also using it, and he loves it too. So what have we really found in the last few weeks that we've been using it? The average response rates have been, pretty good, actually, between, 50 and 80%, really. In some cases it's gone down to 50, but in most cases it's about 70 or 80%, really. What it means is, obviously, almost the entire company is responding to these weekly polls, really. It's been, consistently over the last, 5 weeks, if you will. The average company size that we've piloted this is about, it's about 50 people. Some of them are about 20 odd, and some of them are about 80 or 90 people, really. And the data itself is, probably what you would expect of a healthy, normal company. Most people are pretty positive. There are a few stragglers in between, and then a minute amount of negative energy. People, I wouldn't say call it negative. It's just that people, lots of things, lots of reasons to have a bad week. Like Andrew said, it's snowing everywhere. It's kind of a crappy week, or the Super Bowl, Seahawks win the Super Bowl. All of Seattle is relatively happy, if you will. So that's what we've found, at least in the last 5 weeks. Couple of lessons learned just in the last month or two, really. The executives must be involved in this process. The primary reason why most people are taking the surveys, because obviously they feel somebody cares, really. Somebody's on the other side listening to it. So that's why most people are clicking on the link one way or the other, really. It's the if you are in a remote workforce environment, if you're in a remote workforce environment, the customers that we've piloted this absolutely love it, and you can imagine why. Because you don't have the water cooler effect when you can't have, like, let's go for a beer after work, or let's talk about something. You can't go for a lunch with somebody, and you don't have that extracurricular conversation when you have a remote workforce, really. So that's a big thing, and if managers can get a weekly snapshot of how people are feeling, that goes a long way in terms of in trying to solve the problem of connectivity, if you will. Companies with less than very small companies, we don't believe this is that important. If you have 10 or 15 guys in a room, this is not going to simply change your game, because obviously you can talk to each other. There's enough kind of physical interaction going on that you don't need kind of effectively an online system to gauge sentiment, if you will. Anonymity has been, I've gone back and forth on it. Half the customers have said, hey, this is great. It's completely, the system we have in place is completely non-anonymous, which means completely tracked. Everybody knows what, the managers know exactly what you said. Managers know exactly what you're talking about. Our current position, at least, is that anonymity is not going to be a problem. People are still going to give you pretty decent feedback, even though they know that they're not anonymous. We don't, I think that may change in the future. We're still trying to figure out. To be honest with you guys, we're still trying to figure out what the balance is. At least within the pilots that we've run, I think one measure of success is what kind of response rates are we getting? Are people even still clicking on it? And we've made a conscious effort not to make this onerous, not to make this Big Brother-like. What we are saying is that, look, if you want to take the survey, take it. Otherwise, it's up to you, really. No bonuses or no compensation is tied to taking the surveys. If you think about it, typically most large employee satisfaction surveys are typically tied to some compensation or even some kind of incentives, really. Hey, if you take the survey, we'll give you this $25 Starbucks gift card. Most of the times that's what ends up happening. In this case, in the last, at least between the 10 or 15 companies that we are running it with, we are getting an average response rate of 70%, which which tells me that people are not necessarily that concerned that the fact that they're telling somebody that they don't have a happy week. It is what it is. Really, it's not going to significantly change anything. And the big thing that we learned was that the acknowledgement that your feedback was received is actually a pretty important aspect. If you think about it, what you care about is to make sure that your boss acknowledges the fact that here are the things that are going on. He may not be able to do a lot of things about it, but at least he can acknowledge it. And I think we are coming up with some ideas around how to kind of even show that acknowledgement. You can star particular feedback and add some gamification elements to it. So those are the kind of ideas that we have that will be implemented into this process, so that we can give some kind of close the loop, if you will, from the manager back, or the management team back into the employee base, really. So what I want to do now, right now, is just give you guys a quick kind of live demo, a walkthrough of the system itself. So this gives you an idea of how the system is designed for Flashl itself. So here's kind of where, as you can, yes, my screen. So here's where, it's super easy to upload your employee roster. This is our own system, really. So you can, add employees, email address, first name, last name, and then a couple of extra fields. And this is where we can do some magic in terms of kind of correlating and segregating data based on roles, teams, and location, really. You can import an employee roster using an Excel spreadsheet. Data comes into the system, pretty straightforward. We actually even design an org supervisor information, then we can upload it along with it. So we can do some pretty good magic in terms of how what the scores are for the users and what the scores are for supervisors. As far as the question and options are customizable. We're still sticking to a positive, neutral, and a negative model. You can change the text, but the weighting is obviously 1, 0, and a -1 effectively. So you can change the text of the question to match your culture, match what you want to say. Some customers want instead of saying good, want to say kick-ass, whatever. Go into a little bit more edgy mode, and you can say whatever you want. Obviously you can customize the question, you can customize the the email, and so on and so forth. And then the scheduler. The scheduler is the one that delivers the email. We run it on for this particular system, we run it on 5 o'clock every day, every Friday. We send it out, and the report goes out to at 10 o'clock on Mondays, really. So we wait for the weekend to collect data, and then on Monday morning, the report goes out to the management team, really. And what we've chosen to do, and we have two options really over here, what we've chosen to do as a company is to actually share that report with the entire company. We are going along the trend of radical transparency, and we want to make sure that everybody knows what everybody else thinks, really. And we realize that may not be the case with other companies. So there's an option over here to say, hey, the weekly report, do you just want it to go to the management team, or do you want to go it back? You want to send the report back to the entire company? In this particular case, we send it out to the entire company, but obviously some of our other pilots, we are only sending the report out to the management team, really. And then finally, the analytics. Pretty straightforward, really. We compute the score. You know what is going on. This is for the week of February 7th. You can look on a monthly basis. You can see what's going on. You can see the completion rates and so on. You can see what people are commenting on. And what just gives you a kind of bird's eye view of what's going on, really. So we've not gone into the kind of the analytics and the alert model where we can create some rules around if a person is giving negative scores for more than 3 consecutive weeks, alert the manager. So those are the kind of the future roadmap of where we see Flashl evolving into, really. So that's kind of that gives a good overview of what Flashl is. So hopefully, I'm going to hand the thing over back to for he has some more comments, I think. Andrew? There we go. Andrew, you there? Andrew, I can't. I can
Yeah,
see
here
you,
I am.
but...
Sorry.
Okay,
Hello?
got it. All right. Yep.
I'm on.
There you are.
You hear me? Good.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Don't know what happened there. Like a finger clicking. Under 25 employees, we're going to give it away free because we're generous people and we think there's a lot of information that you'll gain from that, and we feel that's a great way to go, freemium. For pilot marquee customers, at the moment, we're going to do it free. We want to do some joint PR with you, some case studies, so we can all learn about it and further this, because really this is a new concept, and I think it's going to spawn a lot of new research about exactly what people say in this stuff, and we're very excited about that. Going down the way further on, this is kind of our pricing grid here: 26 to 100, $2 employee a month, 100 to 1,000. Dollar per employee. And when you get into the big time with 1,000 more employees, please give us a call and we'll be happy to give you the best available pricing, as we always do. Comments about us: support, privacy, security. Flashlet's a division of Server Analytics. We've been around for quite a while. We have a very well-established data center, and an example of the clients it uses are people like Tails, who are an avionics company, the CDC, Microsoft, CareerBuilder, Adecco, Zynga, Potbelly, your favorite restaurant, Ferguson, Tools, Ivy League Magazine Network. So we're very experienced in holding this kind of, confidential data. We spend a lot of effort in maintaining the security and integrity of our services. How's Flashlet going to evolve? As we've said earlier, we feel that it's going to become something like the NPS for employees, the Net Promoter Score. And really, there isn't anything quite like that at the moment. There's nothing that at least has been seen as a kind of standard that you can have. And we're very excited to try and forward that aim. You could attach your Flashlet score to LinkedIn. We're assuming you might only do that when you're really ultra positive. But, it's an alternative. You can send messages between each other. And Viv has these concepts of lovelets and hatelets. I don't know how you send a hatelet and how your manager would respond, but, we're exploring the different ways that people interact over this kind of tool. And we've seen a growth in all sorts of different communication tools recently. I was just trying to list out, the tools for communication available on a mobile phone now, and you go all the way from Snapchat to WhatsApp to Twitter to Skype to several hundred that I don't even know about. And this is an example of another interaction channel. And as we mentioned earlier, that there is going to be a mobile version, so people can use it on their smartphones, and communication is shifting in that way in a big time.
I just want to add in really quickly over here. We've also been very fascinated with the concept called OKRs. Google and Zynga and LinkedIn and these guys all use a concept called what's called objective and key results, where everybody defines their objectives, defines their key results, and the key. And I think companies have been doing this for quite a while, but I think the innovation here is that all the OKRs within the company are public. So I know what Andrew's OKRs are. Andrew knows what my OKRs are. So and I know what Gretchen, who leads up our sales team, what's her goals for the quarter, and how is she performing towards that. So we see kind of Flashlet evolving into providing some of that functionality also. As we obviously ourselves as a company believe in it very, very strongly. Where if you make the OKRs and the goals public in the sense all the other employees can see that, you will adhere to it, and then there is you shine some light, get some transparency. Effectively, what ends up happening is you get better efficiency out of the system. So that's one of the things, one of the direction that we plan on evolving Flashlet into.
Yeah, and one interesting thing is daily status updates. Now, you get a shout out if you identify what movie that image is from, and there are no hints. But if you've worked in an office environment, I'm quite sure you've watched it and sympathized with it. The daily status updates, it's possible. We think that it's perhaps not as effective as the weekly thing. People should spend about a minute a week on this. You don't want them worrying about, what their update on Tuesday was and if they missed it on Wednesday. Our core mission is really to make employee surveys less painful and really to quantify how engaged and satisfied your employees are. And I think there's a bit too much pressure on doing it daily, but that's, something we can come back to. As we said, there's the pilot mode. Now we're going to jump now down to. There are a bunch of screenshots in the downloadable presentation deck from SlideShare. We put those in there because, of course, you can't really reproduce the demo that easily. For questions about the sales, we invite you to contact us on these numbers. They're going to be in the deck. You can put some questions after this, either via the GoToMeeting, or we're going to be having a chat on this system. If you'd like to join us, that'd be great. On the discussion will be Rob Hohen and Eric Cotto, Vivek, and myself. And Viv, let's hear your parting words.
We are, as Andrew said, we are very, very excited. This whole thing came about, I don't know, I just want to mention this whole idea of Flashl honestly came about because we had an opportunity to get into the employee feedback space. It was a business opportunity, and somebody came and said, like, hey, do you guys have, employee 360 feedback surveys, really? Because we know, we can get you, we want a tool in that space, really. And we looked at it, we looked internally and said, like, yeah, sure, we could build a 360 feedback solution over the next couple of months, and we could probably come up with something and make some money. But then when I started talking to all my friends, it's like, hey, what do you think about employee 360 feedback and employee surveys? And I got the universal kind of, feedback from my friends who are running companies, like, we hate it, we can't do anything with it. And personally, obviously, before starting my businesses, I've been in corporate America, and I used to hate taking those surveys. So then I started looking at it and saying, well, the decision makers don't get too much out of it. The employees hate it, so why are we still doing it? So that was the genesis of why we even came up with Flashl. And it was literally, a few weeks ago, and it was a pretty lightweight system, quite frankly. And everybody who looks at it says, look, the technology isn't that complicated. It's the implementation is the solution, and it's the concept that's the unique part over here. So, I invite you guys to join the discussion at surveyanalytics.com/discuss, or you can post your questions over here, right here on GoToWebinar rather. And we'll answer any questions you have. That's about it.
I do have a couple of great questions that have been brought up that I'll bring before we close this off. Our first question was from Jeff, and he was saying, how would you handle multiple companies on the system?
How do we handle multiple companies? So I can actually, the way the system is designed, actually I can just show it to you. We are running at least 4 companies internally on this particular platform, really. So each company has its own kind of workspace, if you will. And you can see, and the CEO and the management team of that company has access to that workspace, really. So I think it's pretty easy to handle multiple companies within a particular, within the platform. So it's just technologically feasible.
Yeah, the system, the core architecture of the system is for, multiple entities of this sort, and really it's an extension of existing technology that we've had for quite a while.
All right, and the next question
any other questions?
The next question we have is, this seems to be very email driven. What if your population has a low activity rate on email? Would you be able to use a text as an alternative address?
Yes, my friend from ZipWhip has been telling me that. ZipWhip, by the way, is a text messaging platform. So John Lahr is a friend of mine, and he's been and we've been talking about it. So We've had this discussion with a couple of different companies where email is not feasible for some of their employees, either because they are, outside the context of regular email, corporate email, or they're independent contractors also many times. So the next version or the future version, we envision this system just working over text messaging. So that's something that we'll work with ZipWhip on.
This is a great question because I know we've talked about this internally. This is from Raj, and it is there an option to integrate with social network sites other than LinkedIn?
At this point, no. I mean, I think we want to keep this thing employee-centric and work-centric and not make this into anything other than that. So I would say at this point, we don't envision this getting integrated with Facebook or Twitter or any kind of more kind of personal social networks. The extent of integration will be around, if we do anything, it'll be around LinkedIn.
And the last question I'm going to ask is, do you track who is not responding for a longer time? For example, the 30% not responding might be the problem.
Good point. We obviously track it in the sense that we know that some person has if some person has never responded to any one of the flashlets, we'll know about it. So we know the employee, we know the employee ID, and obviously if we've never gotten a response in the last four attempts, we obviously know about it. So creating those rules, like I said earlier on, it's a matter of time. Over the next 2 or 3 months, we'll be creating a set of rules as we go along in terms of what makes sense for alerts and what makes sense for flagging, if you will. So all those items will get kind of built out, effectively a rules engine will get built out over the course of the next couple of months, and that's one of the places where we see some interesting dynamics around evolution of the system.
And the last question I'm going to address before we go ahead and move over to the live discussion to continue this chat is from Julian, and it is, can you talk a little bit more about the security of the platform, specifically data security?
I can give you a quick update on that. Our main hosting system is Internap in Seattle. That's something called a SOC 2 level physical data security center. We also are PCI DSS, the payment card industry data security standard compliance certified. There are monthly scans. It's very important we keep up that certification. We are in the process of doing a lot of security certification for something called 853A NIST standards. So the thing to remember is we've been in this business of collecting surveys and all sorts of information about people for quite a long time. And we really do know about this, and we really do pay a lot of attention to it. So I think you can be pretty sure that we're as safe as any other provider in terms of security.
And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and close off. We have noted other questions that we didn't get a chance to get to, and we will be answering those and posting them on our blog later this afternoon. And at this time, if everyone wants to head over to surveyanalytics.com/discuss, you can have a live chat with Vivek and Andrew, and also Robert and Eric from Idea Scale and Question Pro. And thanks again for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.